Well, we're all still here. Did anybody doubt? Did anybody doubt that we would all still be here today? Well, I didn't. I think that this is a wonderful thing. Someone told me, though, earlier that when we went from the Julian calendar to our present calendar, we lost 11 days. So, about, let's see, 9 more days? There's still time. Oh dear. Did all of you know that it wasn't until the 4th century, a full 300 years after Jesus was born, that it was decided that his birthday was December the 25th? Did you all know that? Probably that's pretty well known these days. And that it took them that long to settle on a birth date for Jesus. And there wasn't, the church didn't have any information that was new that had come out that, that gave them an insight into when that birth may have been. It was strictly political. Yes, they had politics way back then too. So here we were. And the reason that they decided on December the 25th is because that is the day of the winter equinox. It's when the days begin to get longer. It's the coming of the light. And that was a pagan holiday. And we don't like to give up our celebrations, do we? We don't want to give up those celebrations because they're important to our lives. And so the church thought, well, you know what? If we're going to have to compete here, let's just set Jesus' date on that same day, and that way everybody will be happy. And so that's how it came to be that that the 25th was set, and the Saturnalia celebration went on. By the early 1300s, every country in Europe was celebrating Christmas on December the 25th. Well, this is the 4th week of Advent, and we're not coming to the end of the birth of Christ as we've been following it for the last 4 weeks, but to the beginning of a life that changed the world. And as I thought about that, I thought about each one of us, and I thought, there is not one person in this room or in this world that this earth has not been changed by their birth. Have you ever thought about that? Do you know how you have changed the earth? Simply by being here. Well, you have. You have changed it by just being here. There was a time when we listened to the Christmas story every year and we thought, isn't that nice? That is such a sweet story. It's just full of mystery and all kinds of wonderful miracles and angels. And we thought, this is really sweet. And we just sort of slid right on through. And there really wasn't anything that we did any differently afterwards. During the season, we're all full of love and joy and happiness. And then afterwards, things kind of go back to normal, don't they? Well, after Jesus' birth, things didn't go back to normal. They didn't go back to normal at all. Everything was changed. Everything was changed. And we were told that he did it all for us. And he did. He did do it all for us. But he did it in a different way than we were told. He did it by showing us how to live and teaching us that the love of God is within us and that we are spiritual beings and that it is us that is to continue his mission. And so we find that we think that Jesus, we were told for years, and because of this, we were put in a holding pattern. We were put in this holding pattern that Jesus was going to come back, and until he did, we would just sort of muddle along, just like we always had. And yet, that wasn't what Jesus came to tell us. Jesus came to say, look, this is your story too. You too have the Spirit of God within each one of you. You all have it. Now let's start to live it, as I showed you how to do it. And so we were intended to follow him, not just believe in him. You know, it is our job now to demonstrate the Christ in our own lives. We have known for a while now that this story has something to do with us and our own evolution. Now, as we look at the world these days, we sometimes see such horrendous things happening. We think, evolution? I'm not seeing it. Doesn't look like things are getting better to me. And yet, I have this thought that the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The more the earth comes into the light, the darker the shadows will be. And so we will see these things in the world. But if you look around you, you will see that the things that happen in the world that are not of the light, that are of darkness, are very, very few. Very few. It's just that the impact is so very strong, and it touches us all because we are all one. I did not hear about that tragedy until Saturday, because I hadn't had the television on or the radio. And but all day Friday I had this uneasy feeling. It was just a feeling of something's wrong, and it wasn't anything in my life that I could think of. And yet I had this uneasy feeling. And then Saturday, when I heard what had happened, I was like, no wonder. Because we are touched. We are all touched by whatever happens in the world. We wonder sometimes why we wake up in a bad mood, and let me tell you, or depressed, and it's because something's going on in race consciousness that is touching each one of us. I don't know if you are familiar with the composer Giancarlo Menotti. He wrote Amal and the Night Visitors. Are you familiar with that opera? It's been a long time since it was. I don't think I've seen it for a long, long time. But he talks about how he tried to recapture his childhood. You see, he explains, when I was a child, I lived in Italy, and in Italy, there is no Santa Claus. Our gifts were brought to us by the three kings, and I never actually saw them. My brother and I always fell asleep before they arrived. Sounds kind of like Santa, doesn't it? But I do remember hearing them, the weird cadence of their song in the distance, the brittle sound of the camel's hooves crushing the frozen snow, and the mysterious tinkling of their silver bells. He continues, in 1951, I would find myself in serious difficulty. I had been commissioned to write an opera for television with Christmas as the deadline. And I simply didn't have an idea in my head. One November afternoon, I was walking rather gloomily through the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I chanced to stop in front of the Adoration of the Magi by Hieronymus Bosch. And as I was looking at it, suddenly I heard again, coming from the distant blue hills, the weird song of the three kings, and then realized that they had come back to me and brought me a gift. Y'all know what would have happened if the three kings had been three women, don't you? Well, for one thing, they would have asked for directions and they'd have been on time. And they would have helped deliver the baby. They would have cleaned out the stable for sure and made a casserole. And as gifts, they would have brought disposable diapers. Well, as I thought of that little daydream, I thought, well, I think I'll stick with the three kings. They brought gold and frankincense and myrrh, and you can do a lot with gold. So I decided that I'd stick with the kings. At any rate, the Magi, as the three, are sometimes called as a Greek word translated as wise men in the King James Version of the Bible. So in the King James Version, what used to be in the Greek Magi is now the three kings. And it's referred to as a caste in Arabia, Mesopotamia, or Persia. And Bob, you've told me where the three kings came from. Yeah, wasn't that you? Oops. That wasn't fair, was it? Just calling you out of the blue. Well, anyway, they were from the Middle East. We don't know exactly where. And the men were knowledgeable in many, many, many things. They weren't just astronomers. They were just very wise men. And it was a good transition because wisdom is what they represent. They represent spiritual wisdom. And because the traditional story specifies three as the number, the Magi symbolize a synthesis of spiritual wisdom. And the wise men came from the East, and we all know that the East is where is the spiritual. So when you see the East mentioned in the Bible, they're talking about the spiritual realm. And so they came from the East, the spiritual realm. And as they came together, the wise men represent the archetype of the magician. And that is the ability to live in harmony with the spiritual and the material. The potential for extracting the good from every challenge that you may run into in your life, and to bring forth the internal evolution of our divine self. So the wise men in our story are very, very important, and they represent a part of us. These are parts of us that come together in us. I'm going to tell you a story now, and in order to be, how will I put this? I can't think of the words I'm thinking about.
Politically correct.
Politically correct, thank you. I'm trying to be politically correct. I want to tell you that I am from, I grew up in southwest Missouri, or southwest Missouri, and that's known as the Ozarks, and we talk funny there. We really do. You know, you go into Walmart and let me tell you, we talk funny. And it's taken me many years living in the north to get rid of most of it, but I still have some, which I'm told comes out when I get excited. So there was a little rural church in a little town in the south, and there was a man who was a tourist, and he was going from Cleveland down to the Gulf. And so he was passing through this little town, and he noticed that there was a lot of excitement in the town, and he asked what was going on, and they said to him, well, there's a live nativity scene at the church, and it's really something to see, really nice. This little church had decided some years earlier to do a live nativity scene, and so he thought, well, I'd really like to do that. I mean, it's almost Christmas, and I'm far from home, and so I'm going to go see this live nativity scene. Well, when he got there, he noticed something very strange, and that was the wise men were wearing firemen's hats. And try as he would, he could not figure out why they were wearing firemen's hats. And finally, since he couldn't figure it out on his own, he went to the church lady. Looked like she probably belonged to that church, and she had a Bible under her arm, so he was pretty sure she knew what was up. So he went to her and he said, can you tell me why are the wise men wearing firemen's hats and helmets? She said, don't you Northerners ever read your Bible? You never do you? And he tried to assure her, yes, he did read the Bible, but he'd never seen anything about firemen's hats and firemen at the birth. And the woman was just indignant. And she pulled her Bible out from under her arm, and she was raffling through it, looking for this certain passage, and she found it. She stuck her finger on it. And she put it in his face, right up in his face. And she says, you see here, it says, the wise men came from afar. Yep, that's what we called it. Other visitors that holy night were shepherds. And Luke implies that the shepherds in the Christmas story owned the flocks that they watched, because he calls them their flock. And that they leave their flock, which represents their wealth, to go to see this Christ child that was born. And they were so excited. And the angels, well, they were also afraid at first, because the angels came and they spoke to them, and they were very, very frightened. But once they heard the news, they thought, we have to go. We have to go. And so the shepherds represent that force within us that protects and guards the valuable human virtues represented by the sheep. And they went to see the child, and they left their sheep, because that was the most important thing. Their spirituality was the most important thing to them, because it was perhaps a little new. Because the shepherds also represent our humanity. The shepherds represent the human part of us. And they were common folk who were at work in the fields at night. And often night represents that unconscious mind. It is that which lies underneath the conscious mind. And so they represent that working in the night, the unconscious mind. And in other words, the shepherds represent the archetype of the guardian and of humanity. After wisdom comes simplicity. So let's gather together like the shepherds. After the celebration of the Holy Child, the earthiness and the simplicity in yourself accepts the glorious event, the birth of your own divine being. Having known the story from the darkness of the womb in us as we began this entire work of living the gestation. Remember how we lived that throughout this time? And nurturing, and to finding a birthplace in spite of all the naysaying in the world. That's how it is, you know. We're told no so many times. And to the taking in of the Holy Star. Just taking that in. To the empowerment of the East, to the depths. Because each of you is so very deep. And you can go as deep as you like. And all of this whole process lets us know that we were born anew. We are born anew. We are born anew every day. And so, with the birth, we are ready to live a life of a new being. One that develops an extended body, an amplified mind, a compassionate heart, a deepened soul, and a new life of high service to the God in hiding, however it may appear. And so with the wise men and the shepherds, we have come to integrate the spiritual wisdom and the human virtues and created a balance that strengthens the two of us as one. And so once again, we are coming into oneness, not only with the world, but within ourselves. The Nativity is the first initiation in our journey to become fully realized, divine human beings. We are becoming Christ in expression. And at this end of the age, we stand before the door of opportunity. And because we are in process of rediscovering our own divinity, we will enter into the realm of real values and arrive at a truer knowledge of God. The mystery of the new birth confronts us, and through that experience, we must pass. We must pass through this experience. The divine nature must be brought to the birth, both in the individual and in the race, and thus can the kingdom of God on earth be brought into being. There's a poem that I like. I don't know who it's written by. To every man there openeth a way and ways and a way. And the high soul takes the highway, and the low soul gropes the low. And in between, on the misty flats, the rest drift to and fro. But to every man there openeth a highway and a low, and every man decideth the way his soul shall go. Will you take the highway or the low? Life is all about choice. Every day you make so many choices, and you choose the highway or the low. So this morning I'm asking you, which way will you go? Which way will you go? What will you choose this glorious Christmas season? I think I know the answer, so I'm not going to ask. God bless you. Thank you.